Mining Central America is pleased to welcome you to the first Central American and the Caribbean Day during PDAC. We would like to thank our event sponsors, the TMX Group and Social Capital Group, as well as our corporate gold sponsors, Aura Minerals and CTA Environmental Consultants, and also our bronze sponsor, Bluestone Resources. We cordially invite Ana Gabriela Juarez to the stage. Ana is the founder of Women in Mining Central America and president of CTA Environmental Consultants.
So, good afternoon. I'm honored for being able to be standing here today and welcome you to the first Central American Caribbean Day. Before we get started, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to all of you who have helped us generously make this event come together and make it a success. We wouldn't have made it done and would have done it without you, so thank you. During big mining events as PDAC, countries and economies as the ones of my country, Guatemala, and Central America and the Caribbean are sometimes overseen by the largest players. Since my first day at PDAC many years ago, it was my dream to see our countries showcase the mining potential we have, and I'm happy to contribute today to make this a reality. It is our purpose with the first Central America and Caribbean Day to shine a light to our region, showcase some of the incredible projects that are operating or exploring, and the companies that have believed and trusted in our region to develop them. As a Guatemalan, I am proud to call myself a miner and to say that we want and we need the mining industry. As the founder of Women in Mining Central America, it is clear to us that we can't be Women in Mining organization without mining, or projects in standstill and not moving forward. That is why, in Women in Mining Central America, education and advocacy are strategic pillars of our organization and are embedded in our core. So for those who don't know about our organization and the work that we are doing in women's mining in Central America, I invite you to see the following video.
Women in Mining Central America was born in 2021 from the desire to create impact and change the narrative of the mining sector in Central America and the Caribbean. We are convinced that the vast richness within our soils holds the minerals needed for our daily lives, and that the mining industry generates positive impacts for our communities, for our host countries, and for the entire region. And we, as women, play a fundamental role to promote these opportunities. Since its beginnings, Women in Mining Central America has worked on three main pillars: mining education, advocacy, and gender equality. We have created initiatives and events that align with these three pillars and support the empowerment and education of women, as well as children and youth. We see the great diversity of women working in, around, or with the mining sector in Central America and the Caribbean. It is for them that we intend to create tangible, lasting, and beneficial impacts. Some of our initiatives include Children's Mineralogic Club, Training the Trainers, our series of Inspire and WIM 101 events, WIM Insights Podcast, recognition and awards to our Women of Gold. We also participate actively in global conversations to understand how WIM Central America can assist and align to global shared vision, purpose, and key deliverables. We are motivated by our people and are thankful for the companies, organizations, and volunteers that have joined our effort and who have believed in the importance of the message that we carry. We will continue to work hand in hand to create the change and transform our region's resources into opportunities for all.
So today's event, it will kickstart with a brief overview of mining in our region, followed by 2 panels who will share experiences towards sustainable mining and showcase some projects in our region. We will then invite you to join us for a cocktail and live music. So let's call to the stage our first speaker, Dr. Adrian Juarez.
Women in Mining Central America is honored to welcome our next speaker to the stage, Dr. Adrian Juarez. Adrian is the CEO of CTA Environmental Consultants and board advisor of Women in Mining Central America.
Good afternoon, everybody. This presentation we prepared wants to give you an idea on what is going on in Central America and the Caribbean, what type of metals and minerals are being mined and where, the challenges the industry is facing, and provide a space to discuss how to face those challenges. In 1957, the U.S. Geological Service prepared a report describing mining operations in the region, covering minerals and metals such as antimony, chromite, manganese, mica, quartz, and quicksilver. However, in these times, the relevant metals include nickel, cobalt, gold, silver, lead, zinc, copper, and iron. Starting with nickel. In the following map, you will see the main operations related to nickel in Central America, mainly Guatemala, Cuba, and the Dominican Republic. In Guatemala, the operations conducted by Solway Group and REPCA since 2011 were developed based on work completed by the International Nickel Company, INCO, between 1960 and the 80s. Solway Group, a Swiss-based company, produces ferronickel and exports nickel ore to other process plants in East Europe. It has reserves of about 36 million tons with nickel concentrations of 1.86%, and it has rights to an additional 70 million tons of mineral resources. Since late 2022, its operations were placed on hold due to US sanctions. REPCA, on the other hand, is a local miner. They operate the mina Cerro Colorado, has reserves of 5.8 million tons with nickel concentrations of 1.8%, and is exporting the ore mainly to Asia, and Glencore has been the preferred trader. The mine, operated by TELF, also a Swiss-based company, has been active since 2014 and is now on hold due to US sanctions. This operation was developed based on the work conducted earlier by Jaguar Nickel, BHP, Anfield Nickel, and Cunico Resources. The proven and probable reserves are 70 million tons with nickel concentrations of about 1.4%. The area around these 3 operations has the potential to be developed. Most of the applications for exploration license are on the hands of these 3 companies, but there are some applications in the hands of locals with interest in its development. In Cuba, the Moa mine is a joint venture between Sherrit International and General Nickel Company of Cuba and has been producing for almost 30 years. The mine produced mixed sulfides with nickel and cobalt from high-pressure acid leaching process. Sherrit transformed this product into high-quality finished nickel and cobalt at its facilities in Canada. In the Dominican Republic, Americano Nickel owns and operates the Falcondo mine since 2015. It was formerly owned by Falconbridge, Xstrata, and more recently Glencore. This mine produced ferronickel, has been in operation for about 54 years, and operates with grades of about 1.4% nickel. The life of mine could be extended to another 20 years if permits are granted for an area located in Loma Miranda. Moving into gold and silver, In the next map, you see gold and silver operations. There are 5 companies with 6 active operations, 4 in Nicaragua, 1 in Honduras, and 1 in the Dominican Republic, totaling around 1.1 million ounces of gold in 2021. There are at least 3 projects in the pipeline, 1 in Guatemala, called Cerro Blanco, owned by Bluestone Resources, and 2 in Nicaragua, La India, owned by Condor Gold, and El Porvenir, owned by Hemco Mineros, that can add more than 400,000 ounces of gold per year with a life of mine of 10 years. El Escobal mine is owned by Pan American Silver in Guatemala too, has been on hold for about 6 years, waiting for the government to conduct indigenous consultation based on the International Labor Organization Agreement 169. The official schedule to conduct this process should be completed according to the webpage of the Ministry of Energy and Mines by July of this year. When this mine was active, it produced 20 million ounces of silver annually in 3 consecutive years and has reserves of about 264 million ounces. For comparison, Mexico, the world's largest silver producer, in 2021 produced about 197 million ounces. So this mine represents 1/10 of Mexico's production. Newmont has 2 sites in post-closure, 1 in Guatemala and 1 in Honduras, both inherited from Goldcorp. Goldcorp also developed the foundation for El Escobal mine and for the Cerro Blanco project. El Tambor mine in Guatemala is not active. The owner, Capes Cassidy and Associates, is having an international arbitration process against the government in Guatemala and is claiming $400 million in damages. There are several projects in advanced exploration, one by Volcanic Gold Mines in Guatemala, by Royal Road Minerals in Nicaragua, by Unigold and Gold Quest in the Dominican Republic, and by Caribe Metals and Antilles Gold in Cuba. Moving on to lead, zinc, and iron. In this map, you see 2 operations in Honduras. Minera Los Pinares, a local mining company, developed an iron mine, and it's currently in construction. The main partner of this company has been the Nucor Corporation, the largest U.S. steel producer. Once the mine is in operation, it will produce iron pellets. El Mochito mine is a zinc producer, began its production in 1948. It is owned by the Quirungo Corporation and produced in 2015 23,000 tons of zinc in concentrate. The previous owner were Ascendant Resources and Nearstar. And ending with copper, the last map shows us a copper mine and a project owned by Orla Mining, Cerro Quema. Cobre Panama mine is operated by First Quantum. It's the 12th largest copper mine in the world, just behind Los Pelambres in Chile, and since the end of February is no longer active. The operation was blocked by the Port Authority. It was unable to ship the copper concentrate, and with no space left to store, it suspended operations. This is the latest escalation of a dispute over tax and royalty payments with the government. After listening to this overview, can you see challenges here? I will mention some. Politicians use the poor perception of the industry to move their own agenda. NGOs financed by external actors are putting mines and projects on hold, and the people is losing jobs and opportunities. Some governments want to show who is in control. Honduras and Costa Rica are not allowing open pit mining. Panama is not abiding by the rules. consultation processes with indigenous people with no clear rules, and the only loser are the same indigenous people this process is pretending to protect. Artisanal small-scale mining normally working outside the legal framework, putting the miners and their families at risk. What type of challenges we don't see in this region? In Mexico, we see the nationalization of lithium. Indonesia and Zimbabwe are banning export of minerals without processing. Some jurisdictions are banning the use of cyanide in gold beneficiation. Armed conflicts. In Colombia, we identify a preference for small-scale mining conducted by locals. So the question is, what is needed to advance a respected mining operation? These are some ideas. Partnership with local communities, commitment to sustainable practices, partnership with local governments, improving communication with the stakeholders, investing in mineral education at all levels, assisting the artisanal small mining into become a formal business. And with that, we move the discussion to the panel. Thank you.
WIM Central America is pleased to invite our panel to the stage. It is our pleasure to introduce Louise Grondin, our moderator. Louise is the Senior Advisor of Agnico Eagle and Board Advisor of Women in Mining Central America. And now our panelists. Ben Chalmers, Senior Vice President at the Mining Association of Canada. Akiba Leisman, CEO of Mako Mining Corporation. Emily King, founder of Prospector. And Leon Binadel, President and Chief Executive Officer at Sherritt International Corporation.
Thank you, Anna, for this great initiative, and I can see that the presentation really showed us what we need to work on in this region of the world. So we will try to share with you some of the impressions and experiences of these excellent panelists on some of these topics. I'll start with Leon. So I'm going to use your first name because I'm old enough to do that. Is that okay? So Leon, as we've seen, developing a partnership with the communities is not it's a must nowadays for any mining projects to be successful. For some projects, it's the development of a benefit agreement, impact and benefit agreement. But what has been your experience, and what do you consider could work best in Central America and the Caribbean?
Thank you, Anna, and for Women in Mining in Central America for inviting us on this panel. I think Canada's had a great example through the impact benefits agreements. I've had the fortunate pleasure of operating in 5 different countries, physically living there, and operated in many others by extension. And really, the principles are not very different in Central America as it is in any other country. And I think it comes down to the basics of engaging with the local community through transparency and trust, building trust, being honest. Right at the outset of these developments, often we've seen developments start out with exploration activities where a lot of verbal commitments are made, and there's no real track record of what was actually committed to. And so good practices really stem from actually documented agreements, whether those are formally in impact benefit agreements like we have in Canada, partnership agreements, community policy statements. Having something that's written up that is principle-based is certainly most helpful. What we've experienced is these things don't stay static all your life, and having good principles is definitely the way to go. Having very clear, well-defined numbers in it based on expectation that we know changes quite wildly in the mining industry is maybe not as helpful. And so having principle-based agreements that's actually documented is certainly very helpful. But it starts with building trust with the community to be able to get there. Because things change over time as well, and to believe that it should stay static all the life of a mining operation is not reasonable. And so many operators have gone out and attempted to hold people's feet to the fire, if you will, which has not been particularly helpful when commodity prices have changed dramatically and mining companies are making a lot of money. We have had some of those experiences in Cuba, where circumstances have been pretty dire for the country, and nickel prices have risen, and so we were making more money as an operation, but the community was struggling. And so we've made amendments to our agreements that we've had and agreed to allow more local participation or local benefits for the local community, but within the principles of what we have agreed. And so we try to maintain, I'd say, some form of stability within the agreements. But it is all principle-based, and the discussions are always based on trust. And so unless you actually have built that trust relationship with your local community, a benefit agreement is not going to solve your problem. It maintains the trust with the community, is ultimately what drives a robust and a long-enduring relationship with any local community.
So Akiba, would you like to comment on your own experience in that regard?
Sure, I completely agree with those sentiments. We were in an interesting situation where our company was an explorer for about 10 years in the local community, and the exploration team of the predecessor of Mako was actually quite good at developing those relationships. And when Mako came in, myself as management, our COO, Jesse Munoz, as the operating team, to go in and build the mine, this was the summer of 2019. So we made commitments to the government, the local community, that we were going to take this 10-year project and actually turn it into a mine. Now, the construction started in October of 2019. It was going to be a 12-month schedule to do that. And then, of course, COVID happened. We literally would not have been able to finish this project if it wasn't for the support of the local communities. Our main mining contractor, before he was mining for us, he owned the principal gas station over in our area. He never mined a mine before. And we lost access to the country for about 4.5 months, where we had to do this remotely, and our main mining contractors were there holding the fort. So a little bit of a trial by fire, but after that, on the other side, there really is some inherent trust between all sides over here, the community, the government, us, and I think it's an absolutely essential part of the parameters of building a successful mining company.
And Emily, do you think that the investors see that this is a required ingredient to success?
I do. I don't necessarily think that investors know what right looks like all of the time. I think that's a big question that investors have. Like, how can you tell that a company is doing a good job at that, other than just there aren't any problems, right? It's like they know when things are not going well. But I think what I hear folks talk about at an early stage investor perspective is they want to know, has the company actually talked to the community about what they want and need? Right? Because I think there's starting to be an understanding that just going in with an out-of-the-box assumption about what it looks like to have community engagement does not work. So is there a local team that has genuine relationships over time, that's built trust and knows the unique needs of that community, is something that people try to assess before they make an investment.
Very good. Maybe moving to some other ingredients that would make a lot of sense, and it's the adoption of sustainability standards. Cyanide Code, TSM, is one of them. Now it's expected by worldwide, by consumers, by the financial institutions, by investors most likely, by the communities, with the aim to minimize risk and to match the consumer appetite for sustainable products. So we know that TSM was recently adopted in Guatemala and soon in Panama. How do you think implementation of TSM, the implementation of TSM protocols can match these expectations, Ben?
Well, I think the best way to answer that is to look at Canada's history over the last 20 years. And we launched TSM in 2004. We began independent audits in 2006 at the site level. And so we've had going on 20 years of experience with measuring and reporting environmental and social practices. And in that time, we've seen trust in mining in Canada rise. I mean, we do annual polling across Canada. We routinely get results that about 75% of Canadians support us, plus or minus a few percent a year. ICMM just did some recent work with GlobeScan. They do an annual survey globally with GlobeScan, and one of the things that they saw this year, it's not the first year they've seen it, but it's the first year it was notable that across the globe, trust in mining is down, with one exception, and that's Canada. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think the work that we've done with our Indigenous communities with impact benefits agreements that Leon talked about is part of that. But I'd like to think our own work over the last 20 years with TSM has helped with that transparency, that accountability to communities. And so one of the things that our most recent version of our community standard talks about is that expectation that you are looking at the landscape around you, you're understanding who your stakeholders are, including those that are underrepresented, and working with them to figure out how do they want to be engaged with. So it's much more relationship building rather than the traditional way it has been done for many years, which is, the miners go into the community and say, we're going to, hold a town hall or something like that at this time and come and learn about what we're doing. This is really about relationship building. And then it goes further. It expects that companies are testing the effectiveness of those processes for engagement with the community hand in hand, so they'll agree together that they're working or not. And then there's an expectation beyond that that the mine is working on a collaborative risk assessment with local communities from the perspective of what risks do the community, do the various groups in the community perceive and realize, and then working with them to prioritize and mitigate those. And then the same with benefits. How are they identifying the impact, the benefits that they want to prioritize and realize, and working together? And I think that sets the stage for starting to build that trust in the community, in the local affected community. And if you can get that right, then it starts to sort of percolate up to the national level. And I mean, the other part of TSM that's really been a huge benefit to us here in Canada is that TSM is well understood as a standard, but it's also a catalyst for a national dialogue. So when a country like Guatemala or Panama adopts TSM at the association level, they're expected to create a multi-stakeholder body we call a Community of Interest Advisory Panel. And that's a catalyst, a purposeful catalyst, because it's about overseeing the implementation of the standard that will bring national level stakeholders and the industry together to address issues. And we've seen immediate benefit from places like Argentina, where it was implemented and changed the conversation at the national level. We've seen the impact in the Philippines, where it has been cited as one of the key reasons that the industry was able to work with the government and overturn the ban on open pit mining. So I think these ingredients will help if given a chance. It's not a silver bullet. It's not going to happen right away, but I think it starts to lay that groundwork for good collaborative work with communities that you can build on.
So Akiba, as a CEO of a mining company, what is your vision about standards? How do they help, or do they help?
They absolutely do help. I'll come at this from a couple of different angles. So, I mean, before being a mining executive, I was an investor in the industry, and our team has developed many mines, and almost exclusively the mines and the projects we've developed have been parts of the community. We don't really have fly-in, fly-out operations where it's us, them. We really are part of the same community. 90% of our employees are from Nicaragua. The vast majority of them are from within a 15-kilometer radius. And so from both the investment and the local perspective, we wouldn't do things that would either interrupt our investment, interrupt our relations with the community. So we do things, forget about standards, but above and beyond standards. We're the only mining company in the country of Nicaragua that uses a dry stack tailings storage facility. It's now become like a crown jewel from the environmental agencies over in the country. We use our operations kind of to show what the best practices are. The reason why we chose that was not because it was a requirement. The reason why we chose that was for pecuniary reasons, is that if we can actually build a dry stack tailings storage facility, we can get this mine up and running faster. And likewise, it's because we are members of the community. We're not going to be taking risks for our impact for these for these communities, these people that we work with for potentially decades. So I do think standards are extremely important, but the most important thing from my perspective is that we really are a part of a family, and we treat our business that way.
So standards, you were saying, Emily, that sometimes it's hard to see what the company is doing. So do you think the investors can use the standards to actually have a view on how well the company locally is run?
Yeah, and I think I started my career way back in the old days in consulting, and I firmly believe you can't improve what you can't measure and report. And I think that's also what investors really respond to, is when you have standards that you can apply and then show progress, at least towards an objective. So even if a company can really be not just transparent, but accessible about what they're doing and how the standards are applied, and even if they can't meet a standard yet, what they're doing in order to get there, and to be able to demonstrate transparently and accessibly that they're moving towards that. I think that's really what I see on Prospector, at least. You see what people click on, you see what people look for, right? And I think that's really what investors want to see, is even if you're not there yet, can they have confidence in your team and your plan in order to get to that objective, whether it's an operational build the mine, make the money, or standards towards responsible, community engagement and other issues.
Thank you. Next question is for Leon. Can we assume that a partnership with a local or national government can be an important ingredient for sustainable mining business? For example, Mexico is demanding this type of partnership to develop their lithium resources. Barrick Gold is developing this model for its project in Pakistan, and I guess Sherrod also has an experience with partnership with the government. Can you talk about your partnership experience for your project in Cuba?
Yeah, I do think governments can play a critical role as a partner. In many countries, and this is my experience in Cuba, but also in other countries where I've partnered with government before, either in a direct joint venture with the government or through free carried interest, which is not a joint venture, but a direct business partnership with government. Particularly in countries where the mining industry is such a significant contributor to the GDP, such a significant impact on the community, where there's been really no development. And this is sort of the first development that's happening, the industrialization of a country to some extent. And there are no local partners that are sophisticated enough to engage with or to form a business relationship with. So often in those circumstances, the government is a good entity to play that partner to facilitate the benefit for the community at large. Also, many mining businesses had not benefited countries as a whole. And so having partnerships at a national level in some regards, or a much larger government entity being part of your business, allows for greater distribution of benefits. But it is a two-edged sword, or there's some risk partnering with government, because now you're partnering with the regulator, the legislator, and they're your business partner. And so on the one hand, there's risk in them trying to short circuit their own regulations, and that's where countries like Canada, standards that come into play, that is most helpful to set the standards, to set the scene. Canada helps countries develop capacity in that regard to maintain standards and to follow their own regulations ultimately. So it's something to watch out for and be aware of, so that they don't negate their own standards because they're trying to see the business outcome. But at the same token, you also have government expectations versus corporate expectations that don't always align. And that almost goes back to my earlier comment around engaging with the community to set principles, to set agreements. This is how we are going to operate, and set those in place. And really follow those principles throughout. We sit on the same side of the table in Cuba, where we try and understand their perspective on things. We've built trust with the government at all levels. So we meet from the president all the way down to local governments regularly, and continue to build those relationships. The reality is, it's in the relationships. as you've heard before, it ultimately comes down to the hard work of actually knowing the people, caring about the people, and jointly caring about your business.
Thank you. Ben, so how do you see the role of Mining Association in that relationship with government? Because I know Mining Association of Canada in Ottawa, which is right in front of the government. So how do you see the association playing a role in this relationship or partnership with government?
Well, I think in our case, the role that we play as the advocate for the industry really aligns very well with the role we play as managing the standard on behalf of the industry and working with national stakeholders. And one of the reasons that works as well as it does is that when we engage with government on policy related to mining, we come with the track record of being part of the solution. So having been involved in TSM for over 20 years, the governments that we've engaged with over the years have recognized that when we're talking about policy related to Indigenous engagement, we're there raising the bar around how that's done. And I think, I think the notion that TSM has played an integral role in making us more effective, a more effective voice for the industry is a key part of what we've been able to accomplish over the years. And I think we've seen that track record starting to play out in some of our partner countries as well, the Mining Association of Finland, for example, or Argentina. And one of the things that we've also noticed with our partner associations is that when many of them have made the decision to adopt TSM, it was also a catalyst for the industry to reinvest in the association and give it more horsepower, some more resources to manage the standard on behalf of the industry, but also more resources to advocate and be out there speaking with one voice for the industry and getting that message out there to national stakeholders and even affected communities in certain circumstances.
And Akiba, so how do you see the importance of partnership with the government in your own case?
Well, the government is always going to be a partner with you. They're there to collect tax revenues. They're there to be your principal regulator. As an investor and kind of how we operate, we like to know what the rules of the game are. We like it to be relatively stable in the context of normal political discussions. So things can change if the political winds change whatsoever. And we make our investment decisions on that basis. But when we do know the rules of the game, we actually like being the ones making the business decisions with all the responsibility that goes with it, maintaining relationships with the community, maintaining the relationships with the government. So we've never actually been involved in a country where there was a direct participation in the mine, in the project. Certainly we treat governments as partners for the reasons I mentioned. I don't know what my opinion would be about it if we did interact in that capacity. The only thing that I can say is that from an investor's perspective and how I operate businesses, I would be biased against a relationship like that.
Thank you. It's a question for you again, Akiba. So artisanal small scale mining is considered in some jurisdictions as a problem because they don't have standards and as a formal operation would have, whether it's reclamation or use of not use of cyanide and waste management. But other jurisdictions see artisanal mining as pretty much the first step in mining, and it's an opportunity to improve for a mining company. It is an opportunity to improve the practices and to make make mining possible at a higher level of standards. So we've seen some interesting experience in Nicaragua. Can you share with us these experiences?
Yeah. So I guess I'll start with a little bit of perspective when it comes to artisanal miners. So we have a mining operation within what is 188 square kilometers of concessions within our property. So it's kind of a series of connected rectangles, if you will, from the bottom left to the top right. It's about 28 kilometers as the crow flies. It's a big property. The actual mine is less than 1 square kilometer. So where we actually touch on the operations, where we keep the gates closed for our operation over there, and to make sure that we have all of the safety and protocols that it takes to run a reasonable size operation. It's a little bit different for the rest of the area. We deal with a lot of communities who this is part of their culture to be small-scale artisanal miners. Nicaragua does have specific protections for artisanal miners in their code. We do have to leave aside 1% of our prospective claims. It is unclear exactly what that means, so in many respects, we work with the Nicaraguan government to implement what that means in terms of the strategy on how we allow artisanal miners on the concessions themselves. I can say, in Nicaragua, our experience with the artisanals has been, on the whole, good. I would say 90% of the maybe a couple of hundred artisanal miners that are on our property are supportive of what we're doing over at the operations over at San Albino. The ones that actually aren't supportive really don't interfere with our mining operations at all. So it's as with any community, there's going to be people that you're going to have discussions with that aren't fully on board with what you're doing. And I'll contrast this a little bit with our interactions with what we experienced over in Mexico, where the artisanal mining community over there, it was dangerous. They were there with weapons. In many respects, we do not feel safe dealing with them. Nicaragua, it's actually quite the opposite. Now, it ranges also in terms of how big these artisanal mining operations are. Again, to put it in perspective, our operation runs at about 560, 570 tons a day. By far the biggest artisanal miner that we have in our property takes out maybe 2, and usually it's about a half a ton a day for a reasonable size artisanal mining practice. So it's not like this is material that's leaving from a future mine from us. That's not the issue. The issue is safety and environmental protocols that we have. So there are some artisanal miners, this guy that mines about 2 tons a day, he actually has a reasonably safe operation. I wouldn't use it to our standards of safety, but he does take some careful approaches to how he's mining. There are other artisanal miners that don't. And it puts us in a difficult situation when, if we ever have a formal relationship with those, then it becomes our responsibility. And if it becomes our responsibility, you can't operate the way that some of these people are. We're fortunate that there isn't much in the way of mercury amalgamation in the immediate property. They transport it off. It exists in the country itself. It's horrible for the environment in every capacity. So the formalization of moving from artisanal mining to more, say, commercial mining is good, I think, for everybody. But there is a very deep-seated political reverence for artisanal miners in a lot of these jurisdictions that we're talking about today. And they have to be respected, just like all cultural aspects need to be respected. But in Nicaragua, it's for me, especially in kind of juxtaposed to some of the other jurisdictions that we operated, I actually like the artisanal mining community. They're down-to-earth people. I talk to them, eat lunch with them. We talk about did a major business deal with one of them. So I think it's really been a fascinating experience for me.
Thank you. So Emily, when for example you have a mining company and you know they're operating in areas where you have artisanal mining, is that a risk element that's really it's a highlight on the risk profile?
Well, some of my geographic experiences in countries like Afghanistan and other what would be, kind of called post-conflict or conflict zones, and attracting investors into those markets at that time, wearing a U.S. Department of Defense hat, running an exploration program in Afghanistan. And we actually at that time created small mining programs, specifically around industrial minerals, because the mining companies we were talking to about these larger early stage exploration permits or licenses we were helping the government to tender said, there's nobody in this country that knows how to mine. Like, nobody even understands, or the perception was people don't even understand that these rocks hold things that are valuable, and how do you process it, how do you run a mine? So we actually went out and did small mining initiatives with industrial minerals in order to start to create a workforce base and kind of an understanding within local communities about what's there, because the companies were actually asking for stuff like that. I think a lot of it comes down to, again, the existing relationships in the area, and all politics are local, all investment really comes down to local specifics. So what is it in that specific area that would help an investor put a larger, investment in? Is it greater involvement at the local level with artisanal mining? It might be, or it might be, hey, just based off of what's gone on in this area, this would be a big conflict if we encourage this. So I think it really gets down to how an investor can do due diligence and really understand the vision of the company and what they're doing there on the ground. Who are they working with, and do they really understand the implications and the consequences of what they bring into that community? So it's not a very black or white answer to me. I think a smart investor is always going to pay really close attention to the specifics of the dynamics in that community, what's happened before, and the consequences of bringing in any kind of investment, whether it's mining, or I always draw an equivalent to like agriculture. In the US, it's a big deal, like small farmers versus big corporate farmers, right? It's a big deal of the big companies coming in and putting small farmers out of work. In a lot of ways, it's a similar dynamic. I grew up in Maine, in the backwoods of Maine in the US, and man, someone showed up from a big company or the government and tried to say, you can't mine garnets off of your property, you'd have some angry locals, right? So, I think that's the case really anywhere you go in the globe. So it really comes down again to everything being really local and focused on what makes sense for that area.
And Ben, do you have in your toolkit, in the TSM toolkit, what would help in that in this relationship with artisanal miner? I know that human rights is at stake sometimes because you have conflicts. But what can you offer?
I don't know that I have a great answer for that question, because TSM is so rooted in Canada, and we're just seeing now as it grows outside of Canada, various other country associations are adding to it. So Finland added a mine closure protocol because they didn't have the same regulatory environment that we did. The Philippines added a substantially enhanced child and forced labor protocol. And we haven't really, the Philippines has some artisanal mining associated with it, so I think there's maybe some opportunity to think about it in that context. But we haven't really seen TSM operating in a space where there is really big dynamics between artisanal miners and large-scale miners. I would go back to the community protocol that I talked about earlier, that notion of considering artisanal miners as an affected stakeholder when a large-scale mine is there, and that idea of doing that community risk assessment and community benefit optimization with your artisanal miners. These are difficult conversations, and I sort of risk oversimplifying it, especially in this case. But I think that's the best answer I can give.
That's a pretty good answer. Thank you. The next question is for you, as a matter of fact. So we were talking earlier in the presentation that the perception of the mining industry is not that good in Central America or the Caribbean and in some places, and we need to make some education or some advocacy so that people know that mines are providing useful minerals, that they are useful in your daily life, and MAC has done some national campaigns to do that. So what can Central America and the Caribbean region learn from Canada's experience in that regard, in being an advocate for more mines, or good mines for sure? But
yeah, I think I'd come back to what Emily talked about with all politics being local. That's the starting point. You have to get it right at the affected community level, and we've heard that from everyone on here. And if you get it right at the community level, then it's harder for your critics to get traction with affected communities that are the most powerful voice when mining comes to conflict. But look, there's two aspects to our strategy here. One is TSM and focusing on that mine site level basis and generating that data and that accountability. and performance improvement at the mine site level. But then we spent a lot of time too talking about the value of the materials we produce when we do national ad campaigns, targeted campaigns, because one of the things that we learned quite a while ago is that you don't, as an industry association, unless you're very wealthy, with members that are willing to foot big bills for advertising, you can't reach the whole national populace. So you have to focus on informed stakeholders and help educate them on what the products are for. So we have campaigns focusing on connecting the materials we mine to the products that they use every day. But I would say that's only really been effective for us because we've been able to bring some civility to the conversation at the local level in most cases. So, I mean, if you look at the landscape in Canada, the occasional project runs into challenges with conflict with communities and then NGOs getting in. But that only happens now, if that project makes a mistake or gets a community really offside. It's not the norm anymore. And so I think, like the path that Guatemala is on and Panama is on with the associations working with us will be an interesting experiment to see, what that can do quickly with the national stakeholder panels. And then, more over time, the standard implementation itself, we'll see if it follows the pattern that we've seen in places like Argentina and the Philippines. And I think if you can do that, then you can create the space for a bigger conversation about the value of the minerals they're producing for society.
And Leon, in your experience, I guess there are more and more ESG questions when you present to investors or whatever. So is there a lack of knowledge within your, say, institutional investors, a lack of knowledge about the minerals and the value of what we're doing in the mining industry?
I don't think from the investor perspective there's a lack of understanding of what they're investing in. I think just what Ben was saying around local communities is where a lot of challenges come in, particularly when it's a new development and they've not been exposed to industrial development and don't quite understand the scope of it. What we've experienced and I've experienced in multiple companies is employees are not always aware of what the company does and doesn't quite understand the vision of the company and its purpose and where the product is used or how the whole operation is functioning. And so in many regards, I've started doing it in the businesses that I've been involved in, is to educate employees, because ultimately they are the community, they are in the community. And for them to be able to articulate and educate people around the community, they are an enormous powerful force to educate people around the purpose of mining, the purpose of the company, and the benefits to greater society. So we're looking at that from an employee base, and when employees don't understand what the company even does, it greatly bothers me. But from an investor perspective, what we found is as new standards had come and disclosures around these, there's a fair amount of confusion. There's a great desire, I think, to have the one measure that tells us how good we are. Are we at the top of the index or the bottom of the index? We're not there yet, and we're trying to oversimplify very, very complex matters. Communities don't see things the same way. It's different for every community. It's different in every country. And things that matter is different to each community. And so you have to engage with communities in an effective manner. But standards do bring the ability to be transparent, to share with a broader audience what you're up to, how you're tracking against that, whether you've complied or not complying, when you're likely to comply, because you cannot do everything day one. And so that is a good basis for moving forward. And what we've found is, for us particularly, our investor community is not the premier funds, the big pension funds of Canada. We have more alternative funds or alternative investment strategies. And their perspective is a little bit different. So we're communicating and educating them around the importance of why we're pursuing things, because they may have a bit more of a biased view towards making a buck versus doing the right thing. And so it is incumbent on us to even educate our investors as to why this is important, how it fits in the strategy, how this actually drives customer behavior. And for us in the nickel and cobalt space now, we're selling more and more into electric vehicle supply chains. And now we're really starting to touch end customers. And I think that dynamic is starting to open up how the world starts perceiving mining, because typically it hadn't really touched the consumer. Now it's really starting to get into the consumer space, and people are starting to wonder, where is the battery coming from? And they've used cell phones for more than a decade, and they've never bothered to find out where their cell phone battery came from, but it's the same sources as the electric vehicle battery. And so this is going to be the avenue by which I think greater education will happen, because it's so much in the front and center of government policy around climate change that we're going to see a drift into a higher education for all of consumers and the general public around mining and where products are coming from and why it's important.
Well, that's a great segue into my next question for Emily. So we've talked about the communities, we've talked about the government, but engaging with the communities, and I'd like you to share with us what your vision is on your perspective on engaging the consumers, the end user of the products, and on ESG matters. So, from your perspective, how is this engagement going and should be going?
I think it's going really bad. I think if we're all honest, right, we all get it, right? Everyone that comes to PDAC understands why we're important and how much the industry is working to improve, and be a very modern, cutting-edge industry, but we're not very good at talking outside of our bubble, right? And a lot of people, and I am a geologist, so I love an ore body slide. If there are any other geos in the room, they're all beautiful, and I love them, but you put that up in front of somebody that isn't in the industry, and their eyes glass over, and they have no idea what you're talking about. And I think personally that the way we start to change that is we have to start to tell the stories of what we're doing, right? That's how people build trust and relationships. It's by sitting over a meal and sharing a story about what you're doing with your project, right? What is it that project means, and what is it going to lead to in the future? And I think at a big picture perspective, that's what we haven't done as an industry. We haven't told the story, and really, we're a really fun, crazy, cool industry. Who else gets to hike mountains all over the world looking for gold, and all these crazy stories happen, most of which I shouldn't say publicly, right? It's we've got a lot of quirky people in the industry. It's a fun, cool industry that does really cool stuff that the world needs. And I think the only way that you bridge that gap is, whether it's ESG or just the value as a whole, is by getting back to the story. It's an amazing thing to go and build a mine in Nicaragua or Guatemala or Cuba. That's an amazing story. And yet, anytime you see mining companies mentioned in the movies, we're usually the evil space mining company in the sci-fi movie, right? Going after unobtainium. Why did that happen? I think it's not a very, I don't know how, how we do that. I hold a podcast. That's my effort. But, I think we've just got to stop focusing so much on the how and focus more on the why, right? As a community.
But that's an interesting point, because I've been working in ESG matters for a long time, and we're all about getting the data out. So the GRI data, or SASB or TCFD or whatever. So we have the data, but we don't have the story. That's a really good point. The data is available, maybe not widely available. At times you have to know where to look, but the story might not be there.
And that's where I try to draw a distinction, and I run a data platform, Prospector, right? But I think you have to have somebody care about your company before they're even going to look at the data, right? That's what I think a lot of companies miss, is they have to care about what you're doing before the data has value. And so there's a big difference between being transparent, which if you're a publicly traded company, you have a huge amount of transparent data because of CDAR, the best website you could build in 1996, right? So, it's all out there. but there's transparency and there's accessibility. And I would give a shout out, this is not like a sponsor thing or anything, but if anyone's familiar with Geologize and what Hayden Mort does, there's a great program to teach like your geoscientists and your teams how to communicate better about geology and mining, like in the field and with the communities. And I think that's the big part of it. Even your local stakeholders, if they don't care about what you're doing at the mine for whatever reason, they're not going to pay attention to all the great stuff you're doing. The government's not going to care. Nobody's going to care until there's a problem. So how do you make people care? And I think that's a different solution for each company a little bit. And again, goes back to the authentic story of what you're doing in that area, the metal and what it means, and telling the story also of your people and your employees, right? And who are they and why are they working at your company and not somebody else's?
So Akiba, do you do that? Do you try to make your story available beyond the data for your company?
I think storytellers are some of the most important people in the world. It's like it sets up everything from different perspectives. So the branding opportunity, I think we're not a battery metal company, but I do think the branding opportunity to connect actual mining of battery metals with the potential demand is a huge opportunity for the industry to maintain a story and narrative. For us, we're a small company, so I do small things in my small like storytelling part of the world. So like we changed the name of the company from this weird name to Mako Mining. So we own the shark. So now everybody in the local community wears shark shirts, and everybody's part of the same shark family. And so it might sound stupid, but it actually is really important to have like a simple brand that people know what you stand for. There's always going to be like a few small objectives that everybody at the organization is trying to shoot for. And I communicate that the same way to our employees. I communicate that the same way to artisanal miners. I communicate it the same way to our investors. And I think we do it well in the context of our very tiny company that in the grand scheme of things doesn't really matter. Once you actually start getting to larger companies, I think the same principles do apply. I think actually being able to explain what you do well in an interesting and captivating way for whatever audience you're looking at, whether it's going to be your employees, your investors, or whatnot, it's hugely powerful. And once you actually get the ability to have some sort of cohesive understanding from where the story narrative is to the actual operating business and what you do, and make sure that you actually have a valuable business that people want to invest in just prima facie, and then apply that to the communities and the governments. And if everybody is actually operating from the same storyboard, it makes your life a lot easier.
Thank you. I guess, Anna, do we have time for questions or no time for questions? I'm sorry. But this was very interesting. You guys were very generous in sharing with us your perspective. Thank you.
For the closing remarks, it is our pleasure to welcome to the stage Monica Moretto. Monica is the Vice President of Sustainability, Diversity, and Inclusion of Pan American Silver and Board Advisor of Women in Mining Central America. Joao Cardoso, CFO at Aura Mineral Inc. And our host, Ana Gabriela Juarez, founder of Women in Mining Central America and President of CTA Environmental Consultants.
Well, hello everybody. First of all, I just want to give a big applause to everybody in the panel. They were amazing. It is not easy to talk and discuss these things. Central America, unfortunately, still our unicorn in a lot of ways. And I just want to share with you a little bit of a recap of what they said. I think it was really interesting. Some things we heard before, some things actually there were really good concepts. First, they talked about impact benefit agreements in Canada that could be used as an example, and I think that that's a big story for us, a big story of success for Canada. Interesting enough, Ben also at one point said that ICMM commissioned a study a census on what was the reputation of the mining industry in the world, and it was really low, lower than ever. Not in Canada. So again, going back and circling back to Canada, I think it's a good story to share. I think at one point, Emily said, we still don't communicate well. And this is something that we hear over and over again. Mining companies do not communicate well. Also, they're not very good at partnering with each other. That's my own story. I just would say that I see that they're not very good at partnering with each other, and that actually, unfortunately, does hurt us a lot. I think that it also talked about good practices many, many times, talked about the transparency and trust. And they brought back, for those that we do social, the S of the ESG. They talked a lot about bringing communities together, about the partnerships with communities that are central to this story. And in many, many cases, they could even change the conversation with government if the community is on your side and understands your business. I think that TSM is a great tool in the world. It's probably the best right now in the world because it is site-based and it also has a huge connectivity. Every single protocol that they have is connected to partnerships, it's connected to stakeholders, and it's connected actually to communities, respect and trust building. I think risk management also came up at one point. And I just think that one of the things that I thought it was really interesting is that communities are different from each other. And we have to remember that. Each country, sometimes inside of the country, and Canada is an example, inside of a country we do have different behaviors. So when we go to a place, we need to understand our backyard. Number one concern. Now we're gonna actually talk to Joao. I have a question for you. And we understand that Aura Minerals mines in Mexico, mines in actually Honduras and Brazil. And yes, and so in the case of, obviously here we're discussing Central America. So in the case of Central America and the Mina San Andres, what was your experience? What was the good and the bad? Yeah. If we can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. No, so thanks for the question and for the invitation. The idea here was to have Sofia. Sofia is our general manager of our Honduras operation for governments, communities, and legal affairs. She couldn't make it, so I'm going to try to represent her and the whole our team here the best way I can. In terms of Honduras, overall we have been operating the mine, the San Andres mine. It's an open pit heap leach gold mine in the state of Copan, Honduras. It's being operated by Aura Minerals for 14 years now. That mine has been in operations before for many, many years. Many people, maybe not in this audience, but among our investors, they don't know Honduras very well, so they don't know what is going on in the country. So we like always to emphasize it's a democracy. We have seen change in power in government, which is a good sign of democracies. There has been respect of for the law, so we haven't had any issue in relation to that. So I would say that has been positive. We have had some challenges, some of them which I think are common to Latin America in general, not only Central America. Regarding safety depends on the place of the country where you go. In terms of education, so sometimes it's hard to get labor that's going to fit or with the right skills you have to bring from other countries sometimes. Other than that, I think it's in income distribution is always an issue. So I think in relation to that, it's not very much different from Brazil, from Mexico, where we're operating. We have similar issues. I would say the experience overall has been positive. At the beginning of this year was mentioned in the first presentation, there was a statement that Honduras was going to ban open pit mines, but that created a confusion for a week, more or less. That was clarified a week later, that the intention of the new government was not to ban all open pit mines, but the illegal mines, the mines that didn't have the environmental licenses, which we totally understand, and even agree. That was a time of changing governments in which we as companies also have the responsibility to educate. You have new people in the regulating agencies that go to visit you and show everything that you do. Because building a little bit on the previous panel, in my point of view, the mining industry overall is very positive when it comes to ESG. In most countries, at least in the countries where we operate, we have a very strict environmental regulations in which you have to follow and then return. You have all the closing obligations, the chemicals you can use, the treatment of the water. So the impact on the environment is limited, and as discussed before, you cannot make you cannot have the green transition and make batteries without minerals. So if you add that, in fact, it's even positive. And in the social aspect, it's very, very positive because few other industries create number of jobs and income where we create. And then building again in the previous panel, I think it's one of the responsibilities is our responsibility to communicate much better. Who here has or had in the past a company presentation that we take to and put in our website with like one open pit with a hole in the middle of the nature, so we have had in the past. Right now we don't have anymore. That's what we show. It's if you see a consumer goods company, Procter & Gamble, they don't show an assembly line, they show the products. And what we produce beautiful products. So I think I would start with that. If you have that in your presentation, take that off. It's not hiding, it's just not needed. Yeah,
it's not cool anymore to put that picture, unfortunately.
We can show batteries, satellites, gold bars. There are many beautiful things we produce. So I think that's part of that. Other than that, it has been challenging as operating other Latin American jurisdiction, but has been positive.
Just to mention, Aura has been our champion of women in mining Central America since we started. They were one of the first ones to come on board and support us as our gold sponsor, and has not retracted and has been supporting really all the time through the challenges and through the ups and downs. So I'm really thankful for that. But how does your support to women in Central America align to the organization's strategy?
Yeah, so first, I'd like to mention about the importance of diversity. It's part of our values. So we value diversity, and I think nowadays everyone agree that if you have if in your company you have diversity in terms of gender, in terms of ages, younger, older people, nationalities, etc., you're gonna have more innovation. That's widely accepted. Probably you're gonna make less mistakes because you're gonna have less the risk of having group thinking. So you're gonna have different point of views challenging. So for us, it's something that is one of our values, is trying to promote diversity, because we believe as a business it adds value. With that said, I think we all agree as well that the mining industry, when it comes to gender inclusion, female inclusion in the workforce, has done a poor job. In the regions where we operate, only 15% of the employees are women. At Aura, we're trying to get better, but we still have a long way to go. 17% of our employees are women. We have been trying to push this agenda and have a better balance now for a few years. In some aspects, we have done a good job. Our corporate team, we have a small corporate team of around 30 people only, and 50% are women and 50% men. But usually the challenge comes at the mine sites and the more technical jobs. because you don't find. Sometimes you look for someone with a certain expertise, and because the participation is low, so it's hard to find. So what we're doing, it's we're working and doing trainings with the communities, trying to develop a workforce and bringing women to develop their skills so they can work with us. 3 years ago, we started a training program in which we hire people right out from college, but want no work experience, to prepare them to be the leaders of the future of the company. In the first 2 years of this program, we had more women than men. 2 years ago in Brazil, we had 6 positions open in our mine in Brazil, and 5 were filled with women. And that was not on purpose. We just wanted to give the same opportunity, but yeah, that was a result of the process. And the women in mine, it adds to that. We participate not only in Honduras, but also in Mexico and Brazil, because we need to push, because otherwise it's going to be the chicken and the egg. So we cannot find people in the markets because they are not there. So if you don't bring new women, there will be no women in the market to fill the position. And again, I think it's the importance of having more women in mining. Mining depends more on women than women depends on mining. I think it's going to add much more value. Otherwise, we as the industry, we're going to be behind. We're going to innovate less. We're going to be less attractive. So I think that's critical.
Thank you, Joao. So I really want to thank you, Monica and Joao, for accompanying us today in this closing remarks. I'm really honored to be hosting this, and with my team, this first Central American and Caribbean Day. This would not have been possible with the support of these amazing speakers that we had today, with the companies that have supported us, like Aura, CTA, and others since the beginning. Without the support of our volunteers, without the support of my group of directors that are accompanying me today, and I asked them please to come for a second, and without the support of my board of advisors as well, so I asked them to come as well. I have some little recognitions that I want to publicly make for them. Here, I know that this is not we all have full day jobs, and this is our added, that's what we do because we have passion and we want to see transformation in the sector, in our region. So I want to recognize, with the support of Joao and please, my board of directors. Not everyone is here, but Sofia will be, thank you. Then Maria Alejandra, Carolina, and Nadia, please. And my board of advisors, Adrian, Luis, and Monica. And Risa, I think Risa didn't manage to make it today. I'm here? Oh, there you are. Thank you. So this is part of our team that have really worked 24/7 for the last 2 years to make this organization work and move forward. This is part of our mandate to promote the industry and be a voice for the industry in Central America and the Caribbean. So we're happy to be hosting this event today. We are also running a magazine, and I asked Michael Winter from the Northern Miner to accompany us very briefly. We're want to showcase the potential really that we have in the region through a magazine that we're doing together with the Northern Miner. We're going to have a distribution of 100,000 copies, where we're going to showcase to the world that the potential that we have is still running, and I think I want to give a couple of minutes to Michael.
Thank you so much, Anna. Great to see everyone here. I'm Michael Winter from the Northern Miner Group. Great panelists, great conversations, and great to be here to be a part of it. I just want to talk a little bit about focus on Central America and the Caribbean, the first magazine that we're going to be putting out in association with Women in Mining Central America. As a news organization, obviously we're acutely aware of some of the challenges in the region, but that doesn't mean there aren't great projects and very good investment opportunities to be had in the region. And this is an opportunity to shine a light on that. It's also an opportunity to give the companies that operate in the region an opportunity to use our platform to tell their story. And not just the story in the sense of the mining operations and the work they're doing in the region, but also the impact that this work has, the positive impact that this work has on the community at large. I see some of the sponsors here. I want to thank you so much that have helped to make this magazine a success. We have a hard closing date of March 31st, so anyone else who would like to be a part of it, who is not yet involved, I will be here afterwards. Please speak to myself or Anna. We will be launching on May 25th at the Global Mining Symposium that we put on in Toronto. And we'll be distributing, like Anna said, combined digital and print copies of 100,000 over the next 12 months at all the major mining events, which will include the next PDAC, which will the culmination of the distribution of the magazine. We're very proud to be associated with Women in Mining Central America. We're very proud to be a part of this. And we're very proud to highlight some of the positive news and the positive impact that mining is having in the particular region as well. So thank you so much.
So thank you all for accompanying us. It means a lot to me and my team that you're all here. And I asked the team to please put the closing video.
Women in Mining Central America wishes to thank our speakers, whose presence have been invaluable in making the first Central American and Caribbean Day a success. We also wish to thank the TMX Group for hosting us, our event sponsor, Social Capital Group, as well as our corporate sponsors, Aura Minerals, CTA Environmental Consultants, and Bluestone Resources.